Okay, I guess we shall start now. Yeah, hi everybody. Welcome to How to Enhance Your Art, lighting and colorization workshop. Um, to briefly introduce myself, my name is Joanne, and I'm the creator of the Dandelion Promise on Webtoon Canvas. Just to give a little brief summary of what the story is about, it's basically about two boys going to war. Um, so I think we all know the struggles of like the physicality of the stress, but I also wanted to talk a little bit more about how it affects the mental health as well. So it's an angsty story, not gonna lie. So some of my audience has um raised some concern that like, oh, am I treating my boy too cruelly, and like they want some happy moments for them and some fluffs. So I have currently working on a new AUBL series called Forward with You. As you can see, I am totally running away from my responsibilities. But yeah, Forward with You is just gonna be a normal romance story about two boys meeting each other. Um, it's set in a modern time. Yeah, so I normally call them my modern AU, but because only like last year I gave a title like to the series called, yeah. So now this is Forward with You. So okay, today let's jump right in, right? You guys are here to learn something from me, and like I'm here to like share one of my most important um process when it comes to storytelling, which is like lighting, I I remember when I was younger, what I love to do, what I'm drawn to art, it was actually like sketching, inking, coloring. But I think at this age, I come to find myself loving lighting a lot, because it's a lot about to what I call, finalizing the art. Like when someone look at the art, what kind of emotions I want them to feel. So because there is a goal in mind, which my best friend is usually my guinea pig, so my goal is to get my friend's reaction from Patrick to the one to the the one on the left. I mean on the right. Yeah. So that's my goal. Like as long my art reaches that area, I'm fine. I don't mind how other people feel, but I'm just here to like make my best friend be happy. Yeah. So one thing that I realized that when it comes to doing lighting, I think a lot of us or maybe some of the creators will know that blending mode is an important tool. The moment when you go from traditional, you jump into digital, you go into Photoshop, Clip Studio Paint, Procreate, uh, you'll find yourself having this blending mode here, and this thing is such a blessing because legit I do not need to to know the traditional way of color study. I mean, I still know a little. I still know my fundamentals and my theories. It's just that I have got really complacent with blending mode, as you can see from the meme. Yeah, so legit, like if without the blending mode, all of my artworks would have been really flat, right? There's no lighting, there is no depth to it. Um, like you just don't know where to look at when you look at the piece of art. And with blending mode, do you see like the difference from flat to ta-da, like light source, So in a way that I live for blending mode. Without them, I legit can't um beautify an art piece that to make it to the point that I want it to go. That sort of thing. So it's like, yeah, all hail blending mode. So as you can see, like these are some of the most used blending modes that I'm using for highlights and for shadows. If some of you are not aware about blending mode, I'm always open to take questions later about how to use them and such. You know, yeah. So okay, coming back to this, right? Because I'm not just gonna teach you guys about the technical skills, but I'm gonna teach you guys about the theory as well, like what is my process. So I think, um, you know, let's have a recap on what are the general use of light. You know, we use light to light up our subject, to guide our audience where to look, you know, and also it helps create a sense of space and atmosphere, just like what I mentioned in my previous slides, where like without light, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, without light, you know, everything just looks flat. Like you just don't know where to look at. Like um, yeah, and the moment when I have light comes in, it's like it gives off a kind of supremacy level to my art. So I would say that you know, the key of to my art is really about blending mode and light as well. So through my art journey, I realized three things. You know what good lighting can do. Click. You know, I realized good lighting when there are no dialogues, it still shows the storytelling. It's not telling me what's going on. It shows. Um, I'm sure some of you canvas creators have heard when it comes to writing, like there's a lot about like, oh, show, not tell. You know, what does it mean? It means that like people can still follow your story without telling them like the exact situation that they are going through. Like let's say the character is sad. I just have to use like maybe a lighting, the action of the scene to say that, oh, my character is sad. I don't have to have a dialogue that says I'm sad. You know, yeah, show, not tell. And another thing that I find good lighting really helps is emphasizing plot points or events. You know, like let's say you have a scene of a romantic scene of the guy proposing to a girl, and you wanted to emphasize on the ring that he got. Maybe this ring could be a bottle cap opener. Just something that is so out of the natural that you want to emphasize on this part. And I find lighting really does help to bring that one out. You know, and I guess another thing that I found good lighting is really useful for is conveying unspoken feelings. So this one is a little bit in depth. I'm gonna show it through the next few slides to show what I mean in all these three. But I hope so far you guys can understand what I'm trying to say. Lux, do you understand? Is it
Yeah,
clear?
yo, you're explaining it in such a simple way, even I can understand it.
Yes, that's
And
great.
also the slides are so cute.
Oh, thanks. Right. So okay, the first what you call like point, right? Called show not tell. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Disney Pixar Up, the married life sequence, the 10 minutes that make us all cry. At the end when we see a loved one passed away and we have to deal with that loneliness. But through that journey, we saw Ellie and Carl going through a life together, that sort of thing. And I remember when I was watching this 10-minute sequence, um, it was so well done, like in terms of composition, in terms of colors. But one thing that really struck me was how great the lighting was. If you realize on my slides that the one on the left, you can see the lights are a lot brighter to indicate a happy mood, while the ones on the right is sad. Like you feel a little bit um emotional. There's like some sort of heaviness to it, and it's really well done because like um again, it's a sequential, right? So it's like one moment you see Ellie and Carl being happy about talking about having children, and then the next thing, just because of how the lighting shifts, we know that Ellie is infertile. You know, she couldn't conceive a baby, and the sadness that she was feeling in the clinic, and we don't need to know that um she went to like a, you know, a is it like a gynecologist? I'm not really sure. Basically, the one that checks whether you're conceivable or not. But just because how the lighting is placed, we get to see the the poster behind, you know, where we see the mother having a baby, the pregnant mother, the diagram. So we know that um, she is talking about pregnancy, and because the way the action, it just shows that, oh, it's not conceivable. And then the next thing we know that, you know, Ellie and Carl just managed to get hyped up again with their new dream, as you can see on the ones on the left, where they talk about going into the wilderness. You know, you see how the light is so strongly pointed at the painting that Carl and Ellie was doing. You know, so it really draws your focus into that, trying to emphasize that, hey, we can't have baby, but we can still dream about living elsewhere. You know, so as the story progressed, we see that Ellie, you know, she grew old and she couldn't. She's almost like at the end of her life. And I really like how when in the hospital scene, this is the scene that makes me cry seriously. When Ellie passed the book to Carl, you know, the lighting there was just oof, so beautiful. So like I also really love how they use the colors here. Like me and Lux was just talking about it yesterday, like how they use pink to emphasize the mood, you know, to emphasize love. And you know, like as opposite I say, it's like the psychological colors. When we see bright colors, it usually means happy colors. But when you look at the lighting, especially the ones in the funeral, it's so dim that even though it's a bright color, but you still know that um, is really sad for Carl, and his it's like it symbolizes a dying love, you know, because the love of his life has just passed on and he's living in this world on his own. So this entire thing is like legit show no tell, because there's no dialogue. It's just allowing the craft to to tell the story, you know. So I hope this is clear. You guys understand show not tell, all right?
Everyone in the chat are saying it's a really good example,
That's
and
great.
there's a lot of things the chat didn't notice about these things before,
Yeah. Yeah, so it's
so
like,
that's really interesting.
one thing that I really love to do is just to analyze films, because I do watch a lot of movies. I love deconstructing them, and you know, in a way, it does help me to be inspired in creating my next pieces of artwork. So, okay, jumping to the next point, which is emphasizing. Wait, I need to go back to see what's my point. uh, yeah, emphasizing plot point or events, you know. So I couldn't find a good reference because I did the slide like super last minute. So I'm just gonna use my own word to talk about this point. I hope you guys don't mind. But remember how I mentioned about like you know, using lighting to emphasize something that you want to tell, you know. So to give a little bit of context on this scene, basically my character Felton and Ian, they just got out from a first date, but Felton didn't know that he was on a date because he has a misconception that Ian was already taken because of his ring on the finger. So because Felton felt a little bit bad because it's like 4 a.m. in the morning and he's not home, I'm sure he was like thinking that like, oh, I'm sure your partner would be unhappy to be out for this long with another guy, that sort of thing. So he was like like really nervous and say that like, oh, it's really nice that you bought flowers for your partner as well. But when I imagine this scene, I imagine when Ian's like, oh, actually this flower is for you, you know, and that's when the street light turns up. It doesn't need to make sense. Like I know, 4 a.m. I'm sure all the street lights are all turned on, but for plot convenience, to make the scene more romantic, I'm just saying that like, hey, the sorry, like for plot convenience wise, let's just say the street light is it's not working, and when the moment Ian passed the flower to Felton, the street light magically turns on. my next point my next point is basically conveying unspoken feelings. And I remember the one that did really well for this film was a Roni Kenshin the Final. I'm not sure how many of you guys actually watched the movie. But if you guys haven't, spoiler alert, definitely. So yeah, I'm just gonna like mention the spoilers. I hope I don't spoil too much, but basically our main character here, Kenshin, he is traumatized, by his past about his first love, his first wife, and before he met his first wife, he all he know was only about killing. He was an assassin. He was hired to kill government officials, and I remember watching the movie where he mentioned that he always felt a little bit confused of like, oh, why are we killing people? Like because yeah, there was a point that we want to set like the new Japan, like a new system, but is killing the only way to you know bring Japan um, to that point of time. So I remember when I watched this scene, the first scene that you're looking at, the one on the top, um, this was when he moved out with his wife, and it was a new experience for him. I remember because like uh, he has never understood love. Every time when he's relaxed and when you're just next to him, he just gets like all jittery. So I really like how this scene is portrayed. Like, that this scene is really um, there's a play in lighting. Of course, composition and colors does help, but imagine like if I just strip away the colors, you still feel that sense of emotion behind these two scenes. And when I look at this scene on the top, when I look at the interior, when the interior is like so I guess dim, the foreground is really dim, and the background, the beautiful mountains, is brightly lit up. And to me that kind of like symbolizes how he is curious about the outside world, because the inside is just all he knows, is just all darkness, it's all about killing, it's all about negativity. And he's curious of like how it will be like if there's no killing in his life. Would he be happier? And he was happier when he wasn't out and about, being an assassin. So after his first wife died, he did venture out. He became a Uroni, which is a wanderer. But as you can see from the one on the bottom, it's like the same shot, the same composition. He's finally like outside in the woods, but yet you still feel like there's a very strong emotion behind it. And bear in mind, there are no dialogues here. It's legit just Kenshin just standing in the woods and camera just slowly zooming in and just allow the character to take all these things that he has to face. I really like that, like it with the use of lighting, it really does convey unspoken plot, unspoken feelings, unspoken storyline. And I would like you guys to imagine that, like, let's say for the first panel, if everything was brightly lit, the interior is lit, I don't think it gives the same feeling. Like everything would look like flat because you're not sure where to look at, you're not sure what to focus, you know. So this is definitely a lighting choice where they decided like, yeah, let's not have the interior littered, let's just focus on Kenshin looking outside of the door. Does that make sense for you guys?
It's a really smart way to like direct the eyes.
Yeah.
Um, I could imagine if it was like a webtoon panel,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone like the whole panel was like the same lighting. It
Yep.
would be very busy. You wouldn't know where to look. So
Yeah.
that is actually a really good point.
Yeah. So I guess when you're making your comic, you should think about how you want your audience, your readers to look at the piece, because if there's no light, people will just get confused, like, oh, and because the nature of reading a webtoon is like so fast, you want to capture their attention immediately. So this is where I find lighting does play a part in creating any sort of art or medium. Yeah, so it's not just webcomic, it could be film, it could be just a digital illustration, etc., etc. Yeah. So, okay, after like digesting all this case study that I have, knowing all of this, how do I apply this knowledge to my key scenes or my panels? So through my art journey, I come to realize I usually have these three thought patterns while when I'm making my lighting decisions. Number one is like what is happening in the story. I call it like the plot. The second one is what are the things I want to emphasize, the narrative. And number three, what do I want to achieve visually, the technique, or I would say like the emotion, like what kind of emotions I want to evoke, you know. So when I'm creating anything, I always have these three thought patterns in my head. So I'm gonna just go through with you guys on like how it applies in my own panel. So just to give a little bit of context on this panel is basically Felton is hiding away from Ian to hide his feelings. So yeah, what is happening in the story is the plot. So as long my panels like composition tells the story, I think I have managed to, you know, I did like secure this plot point. You can see that Felden looks like he is struggling, but there's still a lot more to tell in this piece. Like how can I bring this artwork to the next level? So then that's where my second thought comes in. Like what are the things I want to emphasize? The narrative, you know, I want to I want I want to tell people that Felton is thinking about the consequences of his feelings. That's why he's feeling a lot of emotions behind it. So in in this frame, you can see that like I added a lot more shadow to really bring the mood down, and I added a little bit of highlight as well because um, I want people when they look at this piece, where your eyes is supposed to look. Like you look at the most brightest area of the drawing. So and then my next question to this it would be like, oh, what do I want to achieve visually, which is the technique, you know, and when I guess this is more of like how can I say like a you don't need this, but it would be great if you have this. I call this my secret sauce. Basically, like when a reader look at this panel, this is the feeling that I want them to invoke. Like I want them to realize that's like there's more trouble than hope for Felton, because you see how the way I composite this piece is that um the dark overweighs the light. It symbolizes that even there is light, Felton is struggling to see it because I mean, look at his action. He's not even looking at the light. He's like looking, like barely looking at it. He's cowering his face, and yeah, in that sense, like, after this I just add a dialogue. It's like to the moment when someone read this, they know that it's a bittersweet moment for them, because spoiler alert, this is when Felton realized that he likes Ian, but because of the whole and the nature of war, there's so much things to consider about, like working politics and everything. So do you see how from my flat, my basic colors, and it went to with proper rendering and lighting involved, like the feeling is so different. Like you feel a lot more for the drawing. Do you feel the same thing? I don't know. Do you guys feel it?
I think it's really cool because in the first one you could also think maybe he was annoyed or something,
Yeah,
but with the lighting you have a completely different emotion. It's really really cool.
yeah. So this is one thing that I learned throughout my art journey, is that because uh not sure, I think most of you guys don't know that I'm actually like a profession in graphic design, and one of the things that I learn in graphic design is to communicate efficiently. So, and when it comes to art, it's always so open for interpretation. So with the use of graphic design, it's like the communication of what you're trying to say is a lot more accurate, you know. So like how this is how I try to apply my graphic design knowledge into my own art. Of course, it's still out for interpretation, but I will try to minimize that, like the misconception. I try my best. But yeah, so um this is what I usually do. Normally after I color the flats, I would normally go into getting the shadows and highlights, and I use blending mode to help me. So I would say that, like, for my way, for what I'm comfortable with this current brush set that I'm using, I'm always leaning towards linear burn. I know a lot of people use multiply, but I find that, like, comparing multiply to linear burn, I find the contrast for linear burn is a lot more stronger. Like it brings out my texture as well. Whereas multiply, it just sort of like um, the contrast is not as big. You get where I'm going? And you know, I in terms of highlights, I use a lot of overlay layers and screen, or even like lighten. I always advocate artists to try around um, what your software has, like um, because I remember when I was younger, like I was afraid to try out things like darken, uh, dark color, burn or something, and I was afraid for highlights like a screen, because I don't know what it does. Is no one teaches me all these things, so what I find really helpful on my own is that, like, I made mistake and I try again, and this is what I found really helpful in my art journey when it comes to giving light to my artwork. Yeah. So
So the chat seems really interested in the fact that you use linear burn instead of multiply. Could you maybe show the difference uh,
yeah,
if you take this panel and you show like if you had the layer in multiply versus linear burn so we can see the difference?
okay, sure. I'll have my Procreate on. Convenience, right?
Very convenient.
Okay. I'm the kind of like artist that I don't name my layer, so People who name their layer, I kowtow to you guys. I don't know how you guys do it. I don't. Um, if you guys name your layer, you guys legit shouldn't be buried in a normal coffin. You guys deserve like a what you call a pharaoh coffin for naming your layers. Okay. But yeah, as you can see, like there's a lot of layers that I have when it comes to doing a rendered artwork. Let me just turn off everything so like let you guys see how it looks like on the flat. Okay, I'm just gonna turn this on. I'm gonna turn this off as well. Yeah. So, you know, after doing like my base layer, this is usually my flat colors. I would add a shadow um behind, right? Because he's standing. The light source is like um let me just yeah, the light source is clearly like here. So naturally like this part here is gonna be dark, right? It's like basic lighting, you know. So I yeah again like I add a linear burn to it. Let me just show you guys the difference between multiply. Do you see that? No wait, this is darken. Yeah, can you guys see the difference between multiply and linear burn? Do you see that the texture is like really pops? You know, so and then the next thing that I would do, because I want to inject a little bit of red in it, because if not, then the drawing will be too cold. So I will add another layer, or more like I duplicate this layer into this one, a purple one. Let me just normal it. It's like 40%. This is how it looks like in normal. Um, what I did is I legit just like go into hue and saturation, because it's a duplicate layer, right? So what I did is just like I changed the hue. So I got to purple. I like this purple color, and I instead of being in linear burn, because I think that it brings out the contrast a little bit too much. So I just wanted like a tinge of purple, you know. So I went with multiply, and I still think that right now the it's a little bit too dark, so I sort of like decrease the opacity to 40, so that like you see that little bit of redness, but it's not too much, because again my background is blue, and naturally your shadows supposed to reflect on the environment. Does that make sense so far?
I like the fact that you added the red. I would not have thought about it.
Yeah, it's really just about balancing the artwork. Like you don't want it to be too blue, because if it's too blue, then it just doesn't add um like a layer of depth, you know. So and because we are human, we are not dead, we are not a zombie, we still have life, and to indicate life, you need to add a little bit of redness to it, a little bit of brighter colors. So this is like one of the reasons why I also add like red on the shadows. Yeah. What about normal shadows? Do you use the purple on a multiply layer, or do you pick your colors manually, or maybe you don't do any other shadows other than this? Okay, right. Actually, I did do other shadows as well. Like for my wall here, if I turn off the layer, this is how my normal wall just kind of looks like. The brush that I'm using sort of like added the texture inside, so it's like not completely a flat color. So in here, what I did is that I did add a normal layer for black, because even if I multiply it, there's nothing much it's gonna do, it's like it's black. So I just kept it as normal. But there is one layer on top which is linear burn, because again I find linear burn brings out the contrast better instead of multiply. But in this case it doesn't look any different, so but I enjoy using linear burn anyway. And from there I also added like a highlight as well onto the wall. I'm not sure if you guys see it. It's really subtle, you know, because in the end again I'm not trying to emphasize on the wall. It's supposed to be something, um it's not the hero of my subject, you know, so I don't have to put a lot of light in it. Yeah.
Someone in the chat is asking if you could elaborate more on lighting.
Lighting, in terms of like highlights or like the types of lighting there is. But to move on, so after like I added the shadows, the natural thing is to add highlights, right? So I usually like would splash some. You can see on my this layer from the thumbnail, there's like a block of like splashes of yellow as well. So if you look at it as normal, it's like this, you know. it makes my it makes Felton looks a little bit flatter than it needs to be, because the things that I wanted to do with this layer is just to enhance the color better. And I find overlay helps in that, like it doesn't disrupt my, what we call, you know, when we look at normal, you know, it disrupts everything, right? I think this was 58%. I just change it to overlay. Okay, so clearly this is not enough. This is like, um it's just one part of the lighting, because I have a key light on him, so I need to add a little bit more. So this is where I have another layer. This is I just use like a flat brush basically, and I change it to screen, because if it's normal, this is the actual color. And the yellow is a little bit too much. I don't want it to be too much. I know I could just like use hue and saturation, but I just don't have the kind of big brain to think, because I'm sure when we are thinking about doing our panels, we want to do it fast. So this is where I find blending mode really helps a lot. Like I just use, you know, because the layers interact with whatever colors that is behind. So I don't have to like use my brain to compute like, oh, if I want to use the light, it should be like in this color. Like you know how you do it traditionally, like because there's no such thing as blending mode, so you have to compute like what color you need to mix in order to get this color. So I just allow the program to help me do that big brain stuff. 'Cause I need to move fast again. So um after this, I came to realize that like, oh, Felton looks a little bit like, how you say, he's not vibrant. He's still not really vibrant. So what I did is I added like a blush on his face, you know, to bring out like, hey, I'm still living. I'm not dead, you know. So this one I put into saturation. I for some reason I don't know why, but I find that again, basically what you like to do is just go around and see what you find brings out the mood that you want to do. I find hard light is nice as well, but it kind of like disrupt his hair, and I don't want that. I just want it on his face, you know. So I find saturation is the one that's like to go, because the red doesn't cover his hair, but you still see a little bit of that tinge red on his hair as well. Yeah. How would you know you
In the
used
chat
too
is
much?
asking what colors you recommend for lighting.
Oh, so when it comes to lighting, I always use yellow. This yellow. When it comes to shadow, I use a blue shadow. So But again, this is just me arbitrarying color. In the end, it really depends on the environment. If let's say you are in a room where the lights are like purple, you know, so naturally your shadows also follow that color, your highlight also follows that color as well. So one thing that I really like about digital art is that like you can color it blue and later on change it with the hue and saturation. You know, does that make sense? Like, do I need to demo it out?
Um, I think it's very clear.
It's very clear.
Don't worry.
All right, that's great.
Someone in the chat is asking if you're worried about how would you know you use too much on lighting and shadows, or in short, you overwork and too many colors on an illustration.
Ah, for me, this one is like okay, let's say I turn everything back on, right? Okay. It's like one way for me to realize is that the lights are not blinding my eyes, you know. Like when have you ever have like a situation where like let's say the colors like let's say this red and maybe like this blue, you know, do you like does it hurt your eyes? Wait, let me try a different blue, you know. So for me it's always about like making sure that my eyes doesn't hurt when I do my work. And another thing to check what I do is also to check change it to black and white, you know. To change it to black and white, just basically just add a black layer and change it to saturation or color. So that's where you get to see whether your artwork has depth. Like, is it too close? Is the color too close to each other, or is it like too far apart from each other? So that is one of my indication to know that okay, this is enough. I don't have to add more to complicate things. So that's one of my ways to find out. I'm still learning about this because I find that to be honest, not gonna lie, I'm actually still learning about lighting myself. I'm not like that of a master. I still rely on my best friend to help me. Remember, like I show you guys the slide. My goal, my goal is to, you know, from from my friend like looking like this to this. So that's my goal. So that's when I know that like oh I didn't do too much. Because I know that if I do too much his reaction would be different as well. Yeah. So this is one way that I normally check my values. Is it too similar to each other or uh, too contrast? But when it's too contrast, it's good because that's what you want. You know, you want the readers to able to read your illustration clearly. You know, get what I'm saying?
Could you
Okay.
show us how you do the little lens flare things?
Oh yeah, sure.
And then I think we should move on after.
Okay, all right.
Unless the chat have any other questions they wanted Joanne to demo before we're moving on.
Okay, while we are waiting for the question, one thing that I do want to tell you guys about. Remember, like how when I did the line art is always in black and white. So one thing that I did was to change the lines to a different color. So one thing, this one, not sure how many you guys know, but I'm just gonna teach you guys a trick. Basically, in your line art, you just add a clipping mask. You know, so without clipping mask, this is how it looks like. Like you see all my scribbles around, but the moment I change to clipping mask, it's like it just goes whatever that is on the bottom layer. It just shows that. So that's how I would because if I didn't have this, you know, it's still the black line is really distracting. So I hope that helps a little. Okay, lens flare, right? Uh, so I remember when I did this, I only had one lens flare, and it's like on 100% opacity, but I still find that it's like still not enough, and that's why I duplicate another layer on the bottom, to really emphasize on that light shining on Felton. And this one cool thing that I found, this lens flare. Do you guys see this part? Do you see how this blob of white? I'm gonna show you this how it looks like in normal. You know, the moment I change to lighten, you see how the colors interacted here. It just added that tinge of like red for me. So again, this is something that I didn't try to compute. I just use blending mode to help, and this is why I blending mode is superior than me. And legit, it's just like finding what you like best in terms of your blending mode. I really do enjoy that little tinge of red on the blue, so I stick to lighten. I don't normally use lighten, but in this case I use lighten. So that is what I did in my drawing. I hope that is clear.
It's a really smart trick. I've never tried lightened. Maybe I should experiment with the different blending modes more.
Yeah.
I think most people tend to stick to the ones they know, like their comfort zone. I don't
Yeah,
deviate from that.
exactly. Okay, back to my slides, right? So I just want you guys to take note of something. When you are doing rendering for your panels, you are sort of like trading time for details, and I think it's good to ask ourselves like, can we realistically afford that extra time to produce a scene? And oftentimes I find myself have to pick and choose, like, because it's a matter of priority, right? Like, do I want to finish my comic or do I want to polish my comic? And one good thing about Webtoon is that like I can publish my comic and later on I polish it, that sort of thing. But if you're like me and you want to have both, chances are you actually can't. you know so how I work around with it is to like pick and choose what kind of scene I want to emphasize. Like, let's say you have 20 panels per episode, maybe you just want to emphasize on one to or three key scenes. So you're just spending time on those three panels. You're not spending a lot of time on the 20 panels. So I would say really pick and choose what you can do. And that's it. Thank you for coming to my TED talk.
That was so good. Thank you so much for having this panel for us and teaching us your secret sauces.
No problem. Do we
so,
have time for Q&A? I don't think we have, right? Yeah.
oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Don't worry about it. We started a little bit later and we had a little bit of technical difficulties in the middle. So, um, I think we can take a little extra time
All right.
to make sure we get all the questions. Um, so, do the chat have any questions or anything you want Joanne to elaborate on?
I hope you guys understand what I'm trying to say.
What type of brushes do you normally use for lighting and shading?
Okay. So I usually have my favorite brush saved. Some of the brush I use are paid brush, especially for my lighting, but there is one brush that is free from Procreate, which is Gouge, and I think this is really good enough. But the ones that I always lean to is not sure if you guys know about uh Max U watercolor. I think some of his watercolor brushes are really good. It's like only 25 USD. If you can fork out that money, you should really get that brush. I think it's such a good investment. I've used this brush since like 2019 or 2018. I'm still loving it. So these are some of the brushes that I use for lighting. But when it comes to shadow, I actually use this. Like, let me just show a demo, like the different brushes. Like, oh no, screen size. You know, So normally when I do my color, I use this brush. So one thing that I really like about this is that I when I do another stroke, it adds another color on top. So in a sense, like I'm already doing shadows, you know. This is what I love about this brush, and this is the brush that I use for highlights. As you can see, it's like a textured, but it's not as hard as the first brush that I was using. So this is normally my go-to. I really love using texture brush. It just makes life a lot easier. I don't because some things in life you just need to use the textures to sort of like portray that like wood or like the stone, you know. And texture really helps. So because if you're using a flat brush, you probably have to like draw the texture, like you know, like maybe this is the wood or something. But if you have like a wood texture brush, you can just, you know, slap that on to your canvas and you barely lift a finger. That's what I'm trying to say.
That's such a life hack. And for people who use something else than Procreate, I'm sure if you go into the like Clip Studio asset store or stuff like that, you can find a texture that does a similar thing. It's just about experimenting with different brushes to see what the asset store have to offer.
Yep.
Um, yeah. Is there any other questions before we wrap this panel up? Is there anything you want Joanne to demonstrate or
I'm gonna hydrate myself. I've been talking so much without drinking water.
yes, please do so. It it seems like everyone understood your
Oh, how do I add the light particles? Um, so actually again it's brushes. I was using um the watercolor from Max Pack. So this is the one that I'm using, the Max Splatter Opaque, you know. So this is like the usually my final touches, you know. Like you can see in this layer. This layer is currently lighter color. It's not the blending mode that I always use, but it's something that I like. So what I normally do is that like let me just draw here instead. You know, the brush is like this, and what I do to add a little bit more depth, I just sort of like just smudge it a bit. Like maybe some parts I don't want it to be too obvious. I just want it to be subtle. So I just use the smudge to like just smudge away. So to have that little bit of that particle effects, that dust. Then
it's all about texture.
yeah, and after this, like I would duplicate the layer and basically, you know, let me just demonstrate out like copy paste. So we have this one. What I normally do is I will Gaussian blur it, you know, so it's like add that little bit of glow on that dust. And I just find the kind of blending mode that I find suits my liking. Currently, I feel add is the one that I like. So yeah, that is usually the final touches.
For those who use Clip Studio Paint, I know that there's I can't remember the name, but if you go to the asset store and press like sparkles or something, that would be like some uh glowing sparkles brush that you can use that does a similar thing.
Yep,
Um, so yeah, I think that was it. Thank you
that's
so
it.
much for hosting this panel. It was so
Yay!
good.
Thank you all for coming to hear me blabbling.
Thank you everyone for coming. I hope you all learned something from Joanne. Make sure to check out Dandelion's Promise and Um, Follow Joanne on Instagram
Instagram. Yeah.
for when the new webtoon is coming out.
Yeah. Forward with you and Dandelion's
Do you have a
promise.
release date for your new comic?
Not at the moment. It's probably gonna be end of the year or early next year because I need to create a library first. I need to create like 10, 10, 20 episodes prior to launching because I don't want another Dandelion Promise to happen where a lot of my readers are waiting for me for an update and I'm just like,
Oh no. Well, to everybody, the closing note before we end the panel, check out Dandelion's Promise. It's beautiful and it's so good. It's so cute.
oh.
A little bit angsty though. Thank you so much for coming. That was it for today. Keep your eyes out. We will have other panels in the future. We will try and host monthly panels. If you have any requests or topics you would like us to touch on and host a panel regarding, you can always message me. And we cannot make any promises, but we will try our best. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.